This week on the podcast for new all-age comic books for the week of August 29, 2018, Ozy, Millie, Pink, Babysitters, Kristy, DC, Dark Crystal, Lucy, Andy, Star Wars, and more.
Hey, and welcome to Daddy Mojo. It's the podcast where we'll talk about parenting, all-age comic books, toys, and more. Now, here's your host, Trey Burley.
Thank you for checking out the podcast this week for the new all-age comic books. It's Trey with Daddy Mojo. Hello, how are you? A little side of business, housekeeping, if you will. When you go to the comic book store, if you want to tag anything that you're purchasing or that you're already reading, that's appropriate for the new all-age audience. Just tag it Daddy Mojo, DADDYMOJO, or also hashtag NCBD. That's the acronym for New Comic Book Day, so that we can read along with you and vicariously look over your shoulder and see what you're reading. Now then, on with the new product for this week, Dana Simpson. Dana Simpson, you know the flagship character that she does. She does the Unicorn series, Phoebe and Her Unicorn. Even if you haven't looked at this original series of graphic novels, you've seen some of the artwork probably, and we reviewed her most recent one. I think it came out last fall, the most recent original graphic novel for Phoebe and Her Unicorn. And I kind of exhale because I don't mean for this to be hyperbolic. We kind of referred to it as a slightly more girl-centric Calvin and Hobbes. And you kind of have to be careful when you compare anything to Calvin and Hobbes, because that's such a classic, iconic character and franchise, and people love it. And like, how can you compare anything to Calvin and Hobbes or Peanuts and the good old days? Whatever. But this is. Dana Simpson has a way of really kind of honing into that middle grade, middle school sensibility and up to where middle schoolers can read it and they say, you know what, I get this. It's funny, it's intelligent, it doesn't speak down to me, yet it addresses me and what I'm going through. And the trick is, at the same time, older audiences, like I'm way past middle school, I can read it. And I can go, wow, I get it. It's funny, and it speaks to me, middle-aged married guy. That's how crazy it is. Her new graphic novel is Ozy and Millie. And I say kind of new in air quotes that you can't see because this is radio. Because Ozy and Millie, it's a webcomic, a web series that she was working on, I think, back in the early 2000s, way before Phoebe and the Unicorn. Way before. Before Phoebe and Her Unicorn. And it was a webcomic, so she was doing it strictly online. And then I guess Phoebe and Her Unicorn kind of took off beyond Ozy and Millie and left these two cute foxes in the dust. And now the two cute foxes are back. It's a boy fox and a girl fox, and these foxes live in Seattle, but they're really foxes, so it's anthropomorphic characters, and it has that same kind of sense and sensibility that Phoebe has, and that Calvin has, and that Hobbes has. And I don't mean Hobbes from Fast and the Furious, I mean from Calvin and Hobbes, where it really channels the middle school ethos and the oddities and the awkwardness of boys and girls being friends. Case in point, our 8-year-old. We had this exact conversation with his brother about a girlfriend. He was like, well, it's a girl and she's my friend. And his younger brother said, well, then that's your girlfriend. No, it's not. It's a girl and she's my friend. And there's a series of panels in Ozy and Millie that is identical to that, except it does it on a slightly more highbrow level. But that's the deviousness of Simpson's work, and a clever deviousness, in that it addresses it in a way that a middle schooler or even an upper elementary school student can read and think it's funny. But she uses some language in there that skews it just a little bit older to where us adults can laugh at it. But she still keeps it approachable for the kids. That's the bottom line. Ozy and Millie, this is going to be great for elementary school and up. I'll say maybe even fourth grade. Fourth graders can read it, laugh at it, and get it. Like, case in point, our third grader read it, thought it was great and liked the artwork, but didn't laugh as much as he does with some graphic novels. If he was in fourth grade, he would have gotten it much more, and the fifth grader at the bus, who is just now discovering things like boys and awkward social situations, she would love Ozy and Millie. It's from Dana Simpson, and it's fabulous stuff. It's from Andrew's McMeel Publishing, retails for $9.99. Go get it. The Dark Crystal. We recently fell in love with the Dark Crystal again because we visited the Center for Puppetry Arts. We live in Atlanta. Spoiler alert. If you're ever around the Southeast, and I say around the Southeast because a lot of thousands, millions, tens of thousands of people fly into Atlanta every day. A lot of people come here for different reasons. If and when you come, you must check out the Center for Puppetry Arts because it's the world's largest puppetry. It's the world's largest museum that's dedicated to the art of puppetry. And they've just opened up a brand new exhibit that is devoted to the Dark Crystal. It's got props from the Dark Crystal. It has actual things that made up the wires and the toggles and the switches. Fascinating stuff that any fan of the Dark Crystal must see. And that kind of led me to look at the comic books again, because over in Archaea, Archaea is an imprint of Boom Studios, they have had an ongoing miniseries, usually on an annual basis, from the Power of the Dark Crystal, Jim Henson, Power of the Dark Crystal, and this week has volume 3 of 4 coming out. It collects issues 9 through 12 from this really intelligent, Middle-earthian type miniseries of comic books. It's not going to appeal to everybody because it's dark in some points. I mean, there's no skirting around that. So it's gonna be better for middle schoolers, but even you middle schoolers, if you're not down with Middle Earth and fantasy and fables, you may not like it. But if you like art, and you like art regardless of what genre it's in, that could also be your jam, because the art in this miniseries is beautiful. If you like Middle Earth, it's also going to be your jam. So middle school and up, check out Jim Henson, Power of the Dark Crystal. This is a hardcover graphic novel, volume 3 of 4. It retails for $25. Wow, so it's a little expensive, but it's beautiful, and for fans of the Dark Crystal, I think you'll really enjoy it. Let us skew just a little bit younger, and almost wholeheartedly for the girls. It's the Babysitter's Club. This series of graphic novels from Scholastic is flat out mega popular. I remember seeing this series a couple of years ago. Then as our children started to get on the bus, the elementary school bus, I said, wow, everybody and their brother, that's a girl, has at one point or another read one of these books. And this week has The Babysitter's Club graphic novel, number 6. It's Kristy's Big Day. This is a graphic novel. So it's obviously a graphic novel. I mean, what more can you say about that? If you're one of those literary parents who only want your kid reading books, I don't really agree with that standpoint, because as long as your child is reading and they want to read, the form or the format of what they're reading, a big hooey. They're reading. It's going to be a gateway entry book. They're reading The Babysitter's Club, Kristy's Big Day this week, and maybe in 3 years they'll be reading Atlas Shrugged or War and Peace. You don't know. I mean, that was my route. I started reading Spidey comics, and then eventually led me to much more advanced books. Kristy's Big Day, The Babysitter's Club graphic novel. It's a graphics book, graphics being an imprint of Scholastic's, and it's pretty reasonable. I believe it's, $9.99 for a book that your upper elementary school, 4th grader, I'll even say 4th grade and up, 4th grade through 8th grade, they will love it. DC Comics, they did something like this a couple of months ago, except they teamed up the classic characters from Warner Brothers cartoons with the heroes of the DCU. I was mega skeptical of this series. It was a bunch of one issue. It wasn't even a miniseries. It's one-offs. Like, it had Superman and Donald Duck, or Superman and Bugs Bunny. It had 4 or 5 of them. And I looked at them, and they were all fabulous. And really, they far exceeded expectations, because I expected it to flounder and be horrible. But they were great, so I bought a couple of them. And I mention that because this week has the villains of the DC Universe teaming up with some of those other people who were previously teamed up, and some who were not. Case in point, we have Joker meeting Daffy Duck. This is a special that costs $5. This is not going to be for everybody. It's going to be for those middle schoolers and up that can delineate between good and evil and take it with a slight grain of salt. So even there are kids who are in young elementary, they love Warner Brothers, they love Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny. They would not get this, and they wouldn't like it. They would say, who is this strange purple suit-wearing person that's not singing Prince and has green hair and has a knife behind his back and is threatening Donald and Daffy Duck? I don't get it, but you older kids are going to get it. And it's going to be totally appropriate for middle school and up. And I totally did not make it sound like it would be appropriate for middle school and up, but it will be. Look at this one also. It's Catwoman, Tweety, and Sylvester special. It's Catwoman with Tweety and Sylvester. What? Awesome. I'll read you the synopsis. In his relentless pursuit of Tweety, Sylvester suddenly finds himself with a new human ally, Catwoman. Tweety then realizes that he's going to need some help too, and recruits a superhero of his own. It isn't long before the scale of this conflict begins to get out of control, and suddenly there's a full-scale war between cats and birds that threaten to take down all of Gotham. Tell me that's not a fun synopsis. And the art in this is neat because it respects both the classic Warner Brothers characters as well as the heroes and villains in the DCU. Also, this one, the Catwoman special, has some art in it from Gail Simone. Awesome! Gail Simone, who will be at Dragon Con this weekend. See you this weekend, Gail. Another DCU comic special this week is Lex Luthor Porky Pig special. What a great team-up. Porky Pig, Lex Luthor, it's logical. They're both shaven, and something's going to happen. Who is the sacrificial pig? Great fun. And these one-shots, there are 3 of them. They all cost $5. And I can guarantee you, middle schoolers will love them if they like the DCU and are familiar enough with Porky Pig and Bugs Bunny and those guys. This one skews younger. 6-year-old kids and up will love this. Pink Panther Surfside Special #1. This is from American Mythology Productions. I've mentioned these one-offs a couple of times, and this one is no exception. Pink Panther, these one-offs are great. They do a couple of them, and they cost a little more. They're $3.99, but this one has 2 original stories. It's got Pink Panther with Mr. Jaw and the Little Man. I didn't know the Little Man's name was actually Little Man because there's so little dialogue in the cartoons. I always just thought it was Friend of the Inspector, but it actually is Little Man. Great comic book. It'll make kids laugh, and ages 6 and up will dig it. Guaranteed. This series of books, it's almost like the Wimpy Kid effect. You know how Wimpy Kid, really, it's middle school gold for reading, but it's also a lot of drawings, and its format is very unique, and it's very accessible to a lot of middle school kids. The format in these books by Jeffrey Brown, same category. Lucy and Andy Neanderthal, bad to the bones. Jeffrey Brown is the author of the Jedi Academy series, so if you look at the cover to Bad to the Bones, you say it looks familiar, and that's why it's the latest in the series from Lucy and Andy. And what you older folks may not realize, even me, I did not realize this, is that it's highly educational. Really? It is. There's a lot of education in this. Brown does some legitimate research with paleontologists, anthropologists, and so forth that go into these books, and it's good fun. It's probably going to appeal more to almost upper middle school and up, but if your child is down with the Jedi Academy series of books, they're going to love this, and this book is probably already on their radar. Costs $13, and it is out this week. This is not a comic book, but it definitely merits a mention because of its awesomeness, even though it does cost $40. It's the Monopoly version of Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. The Monopoly version. Oh, it's got the little player things of all the characters. I was about to call him Astro. It's not Astro. Oogie Boogie's Casino. Dr. Finkelstein's Laboratory. Jack's Tower. One of the best movies of all time. Never remake this, Hollywood. Never. Oh, actually, I just saw this online a couple of minutes ago. In Never Remake news, the sequel to Big Trouble in Little China. That was, oh my goodness, you're going to remake this movie. It's not actually a sequel, not actually a remake. It's going to be a sequel. So the new movie that stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, that comes out in a couple years, it's going to be a sequel, a continuation of the first one. It's going to live in the universe. In other words, the second movie is going to access the story that happened back in the 80s. Awesome. Kurt Russell, please sign up for your cameo right now because I've already bought my ticket and I'm looking forward to it. But back to the train of thought. Monopoly, Nightmare Before Christmas. This is the 25th anniversary edition of the film, thus the game. It's for the fans because it's $40. Star Wars. Star Wars is a malleable property. Malleable is a great word if you don't know that. They're school-age kids. It means it's very flexible and can be kind of molded into things that it is for that purpose. Case in point is this, Star Wars A New Hope. This is a graphic novel from IDW Publishing. It's within the Disney imprint also. Apparently, Disney has either switched the rights for the comic productions to IDW, which is awesome because the next comic book has been doing that one great for a year. We'll cover that in a moment. A New Hope. Obviously, that was the first movie back in 1977. What's great about this one, though, this graphic novel is all-age appropriate and all-age accessible. Because if you go back in the pantheon of Star Wars and you look at all of the productions of A New Hope that were in print, back in the day, like the first comic books in 1977 when they came out, they were all-age accessible. They were. And even if you look at the reprints now, the direct reprints of the comic books in 77, they're good for any age. But the art is not going to be detailed enough to hold their interest. And that is where this graphic novel comes into play. It's new art. And it's sharp, it's crisp, but it's written and it's drawn for an all-age comic book audience. So if you say to yourself, well, you know what, Mom, Dad, back in my day, and we could read these comics and they were cool and they were appropriate. You have this now for kids aged 6 and up, and this is worth noting too because this is Luke Skywalker as he is, not as some muscled up muscle guy that happened in the 90s. If you remember that incarnation of A New Hope, and even recently, I think it was back in the early 2000s, one of the all-age versions of A New Hope had just a muscular cast of Star Wars. And they looked like freaks. This is not that version. This is classy, and it's only $9.99, so it's affordable too. Boom! Drop mic. IDW. I mentioned this a second ago. This is one of the best all-age comic books you can pick up any month because it's exactly what the all-age comic book audience wants. It's got a little humor, it's got a lot of action, it's got characters they know and love, and it's an original story. Because, at least with our kids, they want something that is not old. Even if it's a story they have not seen or heard before, it just smells like a story that Mom or Dad might have liked when they were a kid. Yeah, don't like it. These are all brand new stories. They're miniature stories. So each comic book that comes out every month, it's $3.99. It encapsulates its own little story. It's got 2 little stories. One of them is more action-oriented, and the other one's a little goofier, a little more humor-oriented. It's from Disney. Disney's in there somewhere. But IDW is the main publisher on this. It's Star Wars Adventures. If you're ever looking for a go-to comic book for boys or girls age 6 and up, check it out. Issue 13 is out this week.
Thanks for listening to Daddy Mojo. Be sure to tune in next time. For more information on any of the things we talked about today, just check out the website, daddymojo.net, or hit us up at Daddy Mojo on social media.